Oh, thanks, baby. Thank you.
How's your light?
Let me check. It's pretty good. I have the microphone unmuted, by the way, because I'm playing music for the thing.
I can hear you though, just to let you know.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's see.
Alright, you're gonna do great. I'm gonna go.
Thanks, baby. Okay, I'll see you in a bit. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna let people in now. I'm just waiting for it to post to Facebook. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to arrive on the Zoom. How's everybody doing? Hello to everyone who's just coming in. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Just going to let some more people get on here first. Thank you for your patience. Hi, Professor Bishop. Just going to give it a few more minutes here. Thanks for your patience, everyone. And thank you to anyone who was in our last session.
You can!
People are still trickling in here, so we'll just give it another minute or two. I think we'll get started at 3:05, just for everyone's reference. 3:05, we'll get started here. Welcome to everyone who's just joining us. We'll get started in one more minute here, everybody. Thank you for your patience. All right, I think we can get started here. So this is our second event of the symposium See Better, Hear Better, Know Better, a 2-day online event on deconstructing race and gender biases in music. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited about this event and for everyone to have a chance to speak their mind and discuss and listen to Zekkereya. So Zekkereya is a composer, trombonist, animator, illustrator, and educator. He graduated from CalArts and is currently a graduate student at the University of Michigan, earning a Master's of Music and Improvisation. Today, he'll be leading a discussion about music where everyone has a voice. This event is sponsored by the Alliance for the Transformation of Musical Academe, and I hope you all enjoy. Zekkereya, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
How is everybody doing out there? Everyone doing good? Good. Cool. So yeah, my name is Zekkereya, as Ali pointed out. I have some questions that I'm gonna send in the chat that I kind of just want to take some time for y'all to check out and just kind of think about for the context of this conversation. I want, kind of my hope for this is less for this to be like a presentation and more of like a back and forth. So I'm just gonna send that in the chat. And wait, can I? Okay, that's not. Can I not paste? That's weird. Let me try that again. Oh, hold on. Okay, I don't know what's going on. I have to figure out why it's not letting me send stuff in the chat. Just give me 1 second. Does anyone know if there's like something weird where you can't copy and paste into the chat? Is that like a thing?
Yeah,
So
you can only do a couple lines at a time.
Oh, okay. Dang. Well, okay.
do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, why don't I do that? I think that would be good. I think eventually I'm gonna want to put the stuff in the chat so that people can copy and paste, or maybe we can send it out as an email.
Professor
Oh,
Hollenbeck says you
send
can
it as
send
a
it.
text file. Okay. Man, this software is so complicated. Isn't it amazing what we can achieve with technology these days? You know what? How about this? I'm gonna just copy and paste them one at a time. And then because I want to take like 10 minutes or so just to like read over them and internalize them and maybe ask yourself those questions too. So that way we have the proper context for the discussion. So I'm just gonna copy and paste them one at a time. It's and then I think just to make this more ergonomic for everyone, I'll like send an email out, or I don't know, or maybe I'll have a text file by then. So that way people can hold on to these, because I think that these are good questions to hold on to in general. Yeah.
If you can find a way to send a text file, that would be great, just because people who join later don't have access to the chat that was sent prior to their arrival.
Ooh. Okay, well, I'll just send this, and then while that's going on, I'll just work on the chat. I know that like Zoom conversations can be fairly strenuous as well. So yeah, I'm not planning on going, you know, too like too Zoom on this. Like probably won't have too long of a conversation. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna make a text file now.
I'll do that while
Oh,
you. Yeah, I'll do it for you.
Thanks, Ellie. Okay, so yeah, so if you just joined, I sent some questions in the chat. You might not be able to see them if you joined late. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We have plenty of time. And we're just gonna take like 10 minutes or so to just read them and just think about them and just, you know, let them marinate for a bit. For those of you who just joined, we're just taking some time to look at the questions in the group chat. You might not be able to see them if you joined late, but Ali's going to be sending a text file, and if you don't get a chance to read them, you can take a look at them like while this is going on. You know, we'll have time. We have plenty of time. Maybe we'll go for like 3 more minutes, I think.
So I had to change my settings to allow file transfer, but I guess it's not showing up because this meeting was already in session.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I think that we could actually get started on the discussion part. If people aren't seeing it, maybe what I'll do is, maybe I will share my screen. I'll share my screen just so everyone can look at it. And I can see that this is also streaming, so that way if people are looking at it on YouTube or Facebook or anything, then they can see that too. Man, this software is so silly. Okay, let's see. I think this is it. Just give me a second, y'all. I'm very green to being a co-host / host on Zoom. This is all new to me.
It should be the button right in the middle of the screen where it says share screen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I don't have things showing that I don't.
Gotcha. Well, maybe somebody can start to see what they think of these questions in the meantime.
Sure. I think that I'm sharing. Okay, I'll just deal with that. Yeah, why don't, how about this? I'll just talk about what the reasoning for the questions, and then we'll open it up, and then I'll share it, and that'll be good. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I've never done a Zoom thing like this before, and this it's very new. Okay, so the whole point for me coming up with these questions is I feel like these are questions that we don't often, at least in my experience, I like find ourselves asking ourselves. Um, um, like maybe we're focused on whether or not people can like read the charts or whether or not the gig pays, or we're focused on other practical matters that have kind of been cultivated by our immediate environment, and maybe not so much thinking about what is another purpose that we could use the music for. Something uh, that I, in my experience, that has kind of led me to think about questions like this is my experience in the Pan African People's Orchestra in Los Angeles. So I was originally educated within the context of like the high school, like, band director like system. And then I went to CalArts, which is great school. And I also at the same time started to spend more time with the musicians in Leimert Park, one of whom I actually met at CalArts. And as I got more and more involved with the orchestra, it became apparent to me that, music can be used for a lot of like bridge building in ways that maybe we don't often think about, or maybe often don't feel possible, in order to like be able to communicate with each other. So I thought about these questions, and let's see, how can we start? Maybe could we have, if anybody wants to share, you could just unmute yourself and um, just speak. And if there's like some sort of audio collision, just one of you go out of the way. For the first question, which is, have you ever been in a band where you felt unheard? What was it about being in that band that made you feel unheard? That's the first question. I realized that there are some weird spaces in between all the questions. Would anybody like to share their experience with that? Have you ever been in a band where you felt unheard? What was it about being in that band that made you feel unheard? You can just unmute yourself and just go.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? You can? Okay. I'm going to go out on a limb, and this is a topic that I don't usually talk about very much because I feel like I'm kind of centering women when it isn't necessarily the main topic of the conversation. But in order to illustrate an understanding of the sentiment, I'm hoping that my example and my experience will be useful. Actually, I lived in LA too for about 3 years. I'm in Brooklyn now, but I lived in LA for 3 years, and there I played in various salsa bands. And as you can tell by looking at me, I don't exactly visually fit the definition of what a musician who plays in a salsa band would typically look like. And so I found that I usually was not really particularly well. I wasn't allowed much of a voice within those bands. And what that felt like to me was just it was a situation in which if anything was wrong, it was usually assumed to be my fault.
Mm.
And of course, I'm very happy that I had that experience. I learned a lot from being in those bands, and I wouldn't trade it. But I did find that I had to leave because that's not a healthy relationship. And so what I try to do is to use that experience in order to inform the way that I treat other people, obviously. I don't think that I'm the only person who ever had to deal with that, but just as an example, I'm hoping that might be useful in this discussion. If you don't look the same as everybody else, you don't come from the same background as everybody else, blame is assigned differently. So, and I found that was really destructive. So.
Could you elaborate on what you mean when you say you don't look the same as everybody else?
I was the only woman, and I was the only woman except for, of course, the singer.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time in LA, which was about 10 to 13 years ago, I was the only woman who was playing that style. I'm a pianist who was playing that style of music on that instrument well enough to be hired regularly to play in public. So I was not just the only woman in that band. I was the only woman in LA, a city of 6 million people, who was doing my job. And so I accumulated, there was a positive, I accumulated some celebrity for that. It was not necessarily always bad. There were some really, really good experiences too. But I did find that if anything went wrong, and it wasn't just in one band, it was in the community of those musicians, then it was very typical because I am white and I'm a woman, particularly that I'm a woman. It was mostly that if something was wrong, it was usually my fault. And there wasn't an opportunity to constructively address that.
Mm.
So I imagine that probably a lot of other people feel that way in parallels.
Mm.
So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. So when you say that, because I'm assuming that not everyone has played salsa music in particular, and also like the particular flavor and style of bandleading that comes from, like that's present in LA. Could you maybe elaborate on what exactly those mistakes were?
Oh, well, for instance, I was playing in a band that had been playing together for 20 years or something. What happens, everybody here is musicians. So you all know about ensemble and how communication works in a band. And what happens when you have a band that's been playing that long together, what happens is they start all making the same mistakes together. And so if I'm sitting there, the new person in the band, and I'm reading my chart and I'm playing it correctly, and they've all learned to play it wrong, they sound great, don't get me wrong, but they all are playing the same mistake together, which is why they sound so good.
Mm.
And then I go and I play it right, and I'm automatically incompetent. So that, then there's no way, because everybody agrees. Everybody agrees that the other way was correct because that's what they're used to, and that's absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this sort of, it's assumed that I don't know what I'm doing, which is really destructive. It's not about ego. It's destructive because then I'm not afforded an equal voice.
Mm.
So I'm sure that is the same sort of problem. Again, I don't mean to center myself specifically, but rather to point out that there must be so many parallels. People experience this I'm sure, all the time. So it's really destructive when people have that kind of negative opinion of a person, not because of any sort of egotistical consideration, but because then their voice is not included the same way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can just go.
So, Gerald, I have a question for you. We met years ago, and I have a question for you. The bands that
Oh
you...
my gosh, David! Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm shocked. Hello.
Hey, it's really good to
So
see
good
you.
to see you. I'm sorry. I didn't know this before. Excuse me.
No, that's okay. I'm curious. Those rehearsals and gigs, were they mostly conducted in Spanish? Was that part of the issue? I'm just curious about the language and communication situation.
There were times that happened, but I found that most of the time when what I'm talking about happened, most of the time the rehearsals were happening in English, or at least mostly in English. And I've found that it's not that hard. If you are a musician, it's not that hard to follow a rehearsal in a different language, frankly. So I don't think it was a language barrier. Plus, most of the people I was working with under those circumstances were people who spoke English. I was lucky for that, who spoke English beautifully. I speak a little Spanish, but I'm not very good at it. So I mean, that's a really good point, but I would say that being in a rehearsal, competence isn't determined by which vocal, like by which, that kind of language. We all as musicians, we don't have to speak the same language in order to understand each other's competence or lack thereof. So I don't know that, I'm not sure that had much to do with it. I think it was just that I wasn't allowed to be competent, pretty much.
No, the reason I asked that was just to kind of take the language part off the table as a consideration.
That's well taken. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, no, it wasn't about Spanish versus English. That's not it. None of us need that sort of language in order to determine each other's competence within music. Wow, it's so cool to see you. That's so great. Thank you for your question. That's just a beautiful thing. Wonderful.
I'm also happy to see David Wrightstein because CalArts. I'm very happy to see him too. Yeah, so that's interesting. Also, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for sharing your experience. I would like to encourage anyone, if you feel maybe doubtful about your experience, if you feel maybe like it's ignorant to say what you're saying or anything like that, this is really supposed to be a time where we can get this out there and maybe realize maybe some way that we're not looking at this that we hadn't considered. We're exchanging information. That's the whole point of these questions. I also can't share my screen because we have to restart the Zoom call. So it's okay. I'll just say it verbally. It's not letting me, but it's fine. It doesn't matter.
I can share mine. I made a document of the questions. Do you want me to?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Because there's like a bunch of people.
Absolutely.
What was, because I'm sure that, like, as you said, Gerald?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure I was pronouncing it right.
Perfect.
I'm sure that other people have had parallels with your experience, like as you had said. One of the reasons why I asked if you could clarify what the mistake was because when I was studying salsa, funny enough, with David Wrightstein, one of the things that we addressed in learning the music was this notion of just like rushing. There's something about like the context and like the utility of the music where everyone's getting really excited. It's naturally going to speed up. If it doesn't speed up, there's like something wrong. And that's something that a lot of people would find as actually incorrect. So I was wondering, when you said mistakes, like, was it like, what could you tell me more specifically what those were?
Oh shoot, this was 10 years ago. Let me think. Sometimes with regard to a matter of form, like if they're used to leaving out a repetition of something, or if they the singer actually only does this, whereas the chart says that they're going to do that, then when I'm following the chart, I'm automatically going to end up in a quote unquote wrong place, where actually they're all doing a beautiful job of doing something that is not written down. So, you know, it's pretty quantifiable if anybody will listen, but they don't, because they all agree with each other.
Yeah.
And this
You know
is
what?
so, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, you know what's really interesting is actually I had the same experience when I first joined the Pan-African People's Orchestra. So in the orchestra, a lot of the music is it's not by ear, but everyone knows these melodies, and the background parts are background parts, you know, and everyone kind of understands the form as this like foundation for the deeper personal exploration to come out. So I was handed a chart for, I don't even remember, like maybe House of Saud or something like that. And it was like half a page and like 10 measures were missing, and everyone went to a different section that wasn't on the page. And then someone turned at me and was like, play the background part. And I was like, there's no background part. Like, but I think that this points out something interesting though, because sometimes I think we find ourselves as like a guest, or like maybe like a novice, not in something that is like demeaning or kind of like relegating you to like a level of like naivete or unprofessionalism, but just the fact that certain cultures already, just like by being in that culture and like growing up with that music and growing up in that scene, not growing up in that culture just kind of already makes you a guest. And that there's other information that maybe comes in, because maybe that comes in like with more integration. And like would you say that it would be accurate in saying that maybe it was both? Because it sounded like they were fairly misogynist when you were describing your experience. Would you say that that's accurate, that there was like some misogyny in there?
As a general statement, I would say yes. Of course, there are exceptions. There are some beautiful people I worked with in that community who treated me very respectfully. In fact, helped me to kind of survive that emotionally, that sort of situation. But so I don't want to be too general, but I would say that it's not uncommon to come across that.
Well, did those beautiful people, did they like speak up against the ones who weren't maybe so helpful in that ensemble?
Not regularly, no. There weren't any mechanisms for that. I cannot say that I blame them, because I had to work under those guys too. When you don't say anything, you're protecting your job, pretty much. And I've been in that sort of situation too. Being a girl, I found myself in a situation where, and this is something that I discuss with my classes. We do a whole music and bias situation. And this comes up with women in jazz as well, and women in so many kinds of music, I'm sure. But I have experiences being a woman in jazz, and there are certain things that you're not allowed to criticize for various reasons, you know, and it might be because you're just in the band and the guy in charge is the guy in charge and that's the end of it. Or it might be specifically because you're of a particular background, or it might be specifically because you're a girl. But there are certain things that you're not allowed to criticize. For instance, for me, it was their behavior basically toward women. If I criticized that, then I was either playing a card or I was like on their girlfriend's side or something, you know, like, you know, you're not allowed to, you have to be one of the guys, and that's destructive too. But I wanted to point out that one of the things that you were saying earlier was really resonated with me in more than one direction, and that is the idea of being a guest. And I think that that's really valid. I also think that we need to, as academics, participants in academia, we need to make sure that we remember that when we are in the middle of this sort of Euroclassic white framework of American music academia, the way it so often is, you know, where everything is Euroclassical. Like, the idea of a guest, I mean, what we need to do is try to make it so that people feel less like guests and more like family members, more like they're supposed to be here. And we don't do that. It's true in so many directions. We don't do that. That's one of the reasons why I'm here in this. I randomly showed up from New York. I don't have anything to do with Michigan or CalArts or anything, but I just randomly showed up because we don't do that, especially in classical music, for lack of a better word. We don't as a nation, and maybe even global. And so your idea of being a guest that's the problem, is that we make people feel like they ought to feel grateful that we let them in, and that sucks. We need to let people in and include them as equals and not as guests or as subordinates or anything. And that goes for if you're trying to include people of color in a classical music environment, or if you're trying to include women in a salsa band, that it needs to go every direction. So if they were treating me like I was a guest, with a caveat that cultural appropriation is a really important issue that I think needs to be respected. With that caveat, I don't think it was fair for them to treat me like a guest, and I wouldn't think that it was fair for anybody to treat such and such a person like a guest just because of any other way that they're born in any environment, classical or jazz or anywhere. So both of those things happen at the same time. Appropriation has to be considered, and we also need to include each other as equal, so that the idea of incompetence is judged based on what we do and not how we're born. So that it needs to go every direction. So I really appreciate you bringing the idea of a guest up. We need to stop treating each other like guests and make each other equals.
Yeah. Well, here's an interesting thing about, I'm glad that you resonated with that vocabulary. I think the thing that maybe, and I don't know if anyone else can connect to this thing that I'm about to say, but sometimes when we describe like this guest quality of being related to cultural appropriation, we kind of maybe sometimes equate it with people treating us like as a bad host. Whereas in reality, when we think about what it means to be a guest, and it's that the person is inviting you into that space. So maybe it's and I think that we can have that host-guest relationship maybe without that type of criticism. I feel like in my experience, playing Black American music, I feel oftentimes I end up working with people who don't see themselves as a guest at all, and I'm being a very gracious host. I'm being polite, I'm listening, I'm asking them questions, and I'm sharing this music with them because, learning this music from the people who taught me was a gift, and I want to share it and spread that gift. I think that it becomes tricky when we don't preserve that kind of like guest host relationship, particularly also so salsa music has its own, social history that accompanies it. But one of the things that we find as a commonality between most improvised music, I feel, is the relationship of, or not relation, the institution of whiteness versus blackness. It exists in salsa music. It exists in music from Mexico. It exists, wherever it exists, and then especially like in America, it even exists in gamelan, in Javanese and Balinese gamelan. So many pieces are, created in critique and in satire, and in lament of what the Dutch colonists did in Indonesia. And then that relationship of like guest versus host, like that graciousness that people might offer, like really, really can't be taken for granted. And that's, at the same time, that's assuming that they're being good hosts. If people are homophobic, transphobic, racist, misogynist, whatever, they're not being a good host. The legacy of colonialism, though, I think adds a new layer to this idea of guestness versus hostness. I wanna integrate some more people. Thank you so much for sharing, Jill. I really appreciate it. I want to move on to some more questions because I wrote all these because I was like, oh my God, it's 2 hours. It's so much time. And now I realize that it's actually, we have a lot of time or not that much time. So I just want
I'm
to.
sorry, one last thing. I just see that Robert, who I don't know, this person named Robert has got their hands up, and I'm
Oh
wondering.
yeah. Sorry. It's like Ali, do you mind actually not sharing the screen anymore? It's kind of because I can't see everyone at once. Sorry. Thank you. Uh, Professor Hurst, was that you raising your hand? You said Bob?
I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I was. Hey,
Good to see
everyone.
you.
Lovely to see everyone. You know, so much love for, what the energy everyone is bringing. One thing I would say is that, like, when you are outside of the culture of what you are trying to perform in, for instance, if you're outside of, uh, I know on my sabbatical I went to Cuba, so I realized, when I couldn't play on clave, when they were going, I knew when my shit was whack. It had nothing to do with it had nothing to do with me being black or anything other than that, but it had everything to do with me studying that culture and me embracing that culture and respecting that culture and realizing that culture had no uh, hierarchy. I don't know if that's a word, but y'all are smart. Y'all can figure that shit out. You know, you know, it had no it's a superiority to what I was doing, and me trying to fit into that whole system had nothing to do with what I learned in music theory at Indiana University. It had nothing to do with that. It had nothing to do, it had everything to do with just getting along with everyone, and that was a blessing. And another thing I will say is with regard to I don't know. I had the supreme blessing, and it actually kind of blinded me to the notion of gender. For me to play with Jerry Allen, at a very young age, since I was 15 years old. So I never thought about gender. I never thought about how women are perceived in the industry, because she was so bad. She was like, she was so amazing at what she did that I never even thought about that. The one time I thought, I know I'm kind of tangenting, but the one thing that I thought about when I played with Jerry Allen, it was a great jazz musician, and we were touring in Europe, and I was really young. I was like 18, 17, 18, and I saw this guy completely disrespect her. He embraced her musicality, but at the same time, as a woman, he completely disrespected her. And for me, I had never thought about, this thing that we're talking about, gender equality and race equality, I had never brought that whole system into my being. How that affected her, how that affected. I've thought about race. I had never thought about women and men. I never thought about sexuality and the whole how everything crosses. So I don't know what the fuck I'm saying with this statement right now, but I do want to just acknowledge that everybody's here, and I appreciate that we're all talking about this. And I remember when I was in Europe, it was at the Montreux Jazz Festival, and I was playing with Marcus Belgrave. Jerry and I were both in Marcus's band, and this motherfucker just completely disrespected her very famous guy, very famous guy. And I saw this guy. I had never thought about where all that intersectionality, comes into. That's my millennial word for the day. But how all that stuff came together, and I was so mad at this guy, and to this day, I'm like, fuck this guy that just disrespected Jerry Allen, first of all. And then, I never thought about the sex, like this, her being a woman never entered my mind, that never entered my mind. So I hope I'm not being too confusing, with everybody, but that is that I never thought about that whole I guess it's intersectionality.
No, I feel you. I feel like actually talking about Jerry is a great direction to go in, because when we talk about intersectionality and when we talk about I guess I don't know how many people can see the questions in the chat. Don't worry about it. But when we talk about all these I guess like y'all probably saw the questions when Ali had shared the screen. When we talk about all these things about community and how do we build new languages together and how do we have those conversations, Black women like Jerry are pretty much, I mean, not always, but most of the time left out of the conversation. Um, you know, raise your hand if you play in a band that has half of them are Black women. Raise your hand if you, oh, that's, was it JGW? And that's killing. Raise your hand
Can I
if
actually talk about that for
sorry?
a second?
Um,
Sorry.
yeah,
Could I actually
sure, really
talk about
briefly,
that?
because like I'm trying to, there's like so much material to get through, but yeah, sure,
Yeah.
please share.
Well, being in that room was the first time that I'm an instrumentalist, and that was the first time I felt comfortable in a room. And
What instrument?
I think when we're thinking, I play the saxophone.
Oh.
And I think when we're thinking about creating communities, there's a lot of communities throughout time that have been created around what we call our music. I think about the AACM, and I was reading a lot of Amiri Baraka a few years ago, and then I learned about how much he was telling Bill Dixon that he shouldn't be playing as effeminate as he should be.
Yeah.
And then I started reading some Fred Moten, and he, in the introduction to one of his biggest texts, is telling us very explicitly that Black feminism is what we need. So I feel like a lot of the gaps in the conversation come from a lack of education. We are in this institution of colonialism, but we haven't really looked to the systems that have already existed over time. We don't really talk about like the 10 points of the Black Panther Party when we're talking about deconstructing jazz music. And I think that should be a massive part of this discussion, because we're not new to this. And I am really grateful to all of our elders here, because this is a really long battle, and sorry, I'm getting emotional, but anyways, yeah.
No, thank you so much for sharing. That's interesting, because I feel like that I feel like that is an intersectional kind of like corner we never really get into, partially because for a lot of people, they make, through the institutions of colonialism and Eurocentricity that we've perpetuated, a lot of Black women just don't feel comfortable and they just bounce. They're like, I don't want to, I can't deal with this shit. And what's interesting is that even in an ensemble that is founded on principles of Afrofuturism, like the orchestra, I witness that disrespect and have to step up and speak up and do something on a regular basis, because even those cats, some of whom were Black Panthers or were part of that movement or had sort of connection to that movement, they still perpetuate a lot of very harmful ideas, even though the music that we're playing is supposed to be very healing. It's very community oriented. Horace Tapscott set up the band as a community band. Everything is in place for it to be something that is liberating to people and builds bridges of communication. Yet there's still this misogyny and homophobia, quite rampant. And what's even more interesting too, is that in the orchestra, a lot of the times what we deal with are divine ideas of masculinity and femininity, stuff that is within all of us. Something that, like, when you play, you kind of connect to, what is it? Bob? Oh, sorry, that's an, oh, wait, Bob, wait, sorry, I just saw another message. Let me just finish this thing, and then Professor Hurst, if you wanted to jump in. For the idea of the divine masculine, the divine feminine, it's supposed to be something where, like, this whole idea of playing like a girl, which I know that a lot of people have experienced and have been frustrated with. Some people have not spoken out, some people have spoken out against that in ensembles. But it's supposed to be something that is.
I want to play like a girl. I want to play like a girl. Damn.
Yeah, because it's,
I mean,
like
the whole thing of sexuality is so wow. It's through the lens of a white male, or a black male. It's so but wow. The way my mother caressed me, the way my wife caressed me. Who doesn't want to make people feel like that with your art? I want to make people feel like that with my art. I want to when I play, that's what I want people to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, like, fucked up. That why is that vilified? Why is that vilified? Why is being like a woman vilified?
Mm-hmm.
Why okay, I'll just shut the fuck up. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, Professor Sereth, you had a question?
Yeah, hey. Great, thanks everyone. I'm just, David Whitestein, just so good to see you. I remember that we talked on the phone. I was driving through the mountains in somewhere, and I forget what the topic was, but so Ali and Zekkereya,
Mm-hmm.
this conversation, and Bob Hurst a little bit too, the direction this is going, so I'm thinking about the conversations we had in our class last March. I mean, my God, it wasn't that long ago, but like the world is different, isn't it? But like we were right in the space. We were in the on deck circle. We didn't realize it was like it was the World Series. We thought it was spring training, and but what was I'm wondering if you guys could maybe reflect, because that was like a charged moment.
Oh
And,
yeah. Are you talking about like the one where we discussed the readings?
yeah, and in particular, the thing about sort of the urgency factor of Black music,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of the racial justice imperative, you might say, and in conjunction with the gender imperative, the gender balance imperative, and the fact that there comes a point sometimes where, and the reason I'm bringing this up is this connects with the previous session in a really beautiful way, where the question comes up: can we is there a moment where we want to focus on one lens, and is it possible where this, almost like the politically correct imperative to be inclusive, can dilute that lens? It's funny, when I sent this thing out to the Atma network last night, somebody who's really big on class justice in a way, kind of, got back to me with a very sharp email. He's saying that he was the person's not on the call, so I can say it, very surprised and disappointed that this symposium was not going to foreground class kind of stuff, even though there's like a lot that's like really embedded within it, you know. So that kind of just reminded me of this too. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder if you guys, you know, because somebody asked a question this morning. In fact, Ron McCurdy from USC made a point about, and then I, of course, because I'm on this, you know, I seconded it. That, you know, amidst this whole DEI flow, musical, there's like what I call aversion to musical blackness. And it is like, it's like the first casualty, you know. So, and just to close up my question, it was probably more of an observation. The one thing that I'm recalling that class is the issue of Black feminism, which is a powerful bridge, kind of slipped into the conversation then, but it's in the conversation now in a huge way. I mean, like a huge ass way. And so I thought, like, you know, if you guys could just maybe, you know, because this flow has come, you know, very powerfully and beautifully right up to the edge of that. And I don't know, go to it if you're so inclined.
Ali, do you want to say something? I've been talking a lot.
Sure. I mean, I think.
Can I say one thing really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize, but I just did this big interview like way before the bubble happened. You know, you know, whatever it is, the Covina bubble happened, and I did a great interview with Angela Davis, and she is writing a book about Jerry Allen, and what we shared about the illumination of her, you know, what we're doing right here is so beautiful, you know, and I just want to say to everyone, you know, for me to sit in the room with Angela Davis and just like talk about Jerry Allen, it was one of the highlights of my life.
Yeah.
It's one of the highlights of my life, and I just want you all to know that all the work that we're doing, all the work and the treachery, you know, and that's not a word, I don't know, but you know, just for us, the sunlight is coming through, and I can't, you know. So I know the shit I'm saying is right. So, you know, sunlight is coming through. So I just want to say that I did this interview with her about Jerry Allen. I did an interview with Angela Davis about Jerry Allen.
Yeah.
And that's all the fuck I want to say. Shit, I'm trying to make it really, you know, like really poignant, and I'll make a big point. But that's the point right there. Shit, you know, I did an interview with Angela Davis about Jerry Allen, and if we can keep going in that direction and illuminating those facts, that's not the point I wanted to make. But shit, you know, I do have a little wine going, you know, and, you know, so yeah. You know, that is a great point. that tickled my fancy. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, part of what we, and then just to transition, and then Ali, you go on. I think, you know, part of why we need to include Black feminism in this conversation is because there are more people like Jerry and like Angela who are often discouraged when they get to college or learning institutions because they're faced with stuff that's both racist and, you know, misogynist. And, you know, the more that we can learn and the more that we can educate each other, the more we can bring, or not bring, but the more that Black women will might feel more comfortable in these spaces, and we can actually have these conversations. Because it's like, I mean, you know, some people have their cameras off, but, you know, I don't see any, you know, Black women in this conversation, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. So, you know, it's really on us to like learn and, you know, facilitate their comfort in that space. Okay, Ali, you know, I just wanted to transition.
I just want to say the chat, Allison Lewis, I see you. Also, thanks for coming to the last session. But yeah, I mean, just to go back to like what we were talking about at intersectionality, essentially, and our class, and I would just say that if I've learned anything, especially over the past year, and even more so in the last 6 months, is just the importance of including everyone in this conversation of quote equality. There cannot be any discussion of race or gender or class or any kind of group of people without a comprehensive understanding of the population. And I don't think that there can be really any kind of work that toward equality or diversity or equity or all of these kind of buzzwords without reaching not only all the people who don't think about these things, but reaching the people who feel marginalized. And I think that's the work that needs to be done right now, is to make sure that everyone is part of the same discussion and everyone is considered in these discourses.
Yeah. I'm just gonna put this away. Making too many vibrations. You know, I feel like this is a good, okay, so tying this back to what we were talking about in Ed's class. You know, I can't really, you know, speak to what would be like more what would make like women comfortable from my own experience other than just listening. But in the context of Ed's class, one of the things that we discussed was what would it mean to facilitate the comfort of Black students studying their own music. And one of the things that we were talking about specifically in Ed's class, because, you know, obviously we talked about race quite often because we're studying Black music, you know, and one of the things we talked about was how can we teach the music and play the music in a way that facilitates the way the music is actually taught, the way that the music is actually internalized, and also facilitates many different aesthetics from the Black experience. Like, for example, I haven't played in a big band that has embraced techno aesthetics in an organic way, not like, you know, you write it into the chart, you notate for a percussion ensemble. It's like, no, like you have somebody doing their stuff their way. I haven't been in a big band where there's been someone using an SP404 and like making beats. I haven't been in an ensemble, you know, where there's been an MC or anybody spitting or anything like that. And that doesn't necessarily facilitate the comfort of Black musicians who are growing up in this like contemporary time where maybe the music that they feel more comfortable in, the space that they feel more comfortable in, aren't necessarily playing Glenn Miller or playing who's the guy who did In the Mood? Who's that? Or not In the Mood? Is it In the Mood? The one that's like an arpeggio. Is that Glenn Miller? Yeah. There you go. Allison, I was wondering if you could speak to your experience about what makes you uncomfortable in these ensemble situations.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Lewis. I'm from the University of Kansas. My background is in vocal performance, and then I just finished my MA in African American Studies, and now I'm a doctoral student in American Studies. I specifically study disparities for African Americans in music education. So this is absolutely sort of what I do, and I focus in Black opera, in which there are hundreds. And I, yeah, I think the experience of so many Black peoples within classical music education is trauma. And I think if we're going to sit down and actually understand these experiences, we have to at first name the framework through which we teach classical music in the first place. And even just getting people to understand that is very difficult, to even admit that they have a framework. And I think to understand that, we have to understand what this music comes from, like what was happening when a lot of this music was being developed. A lot of this music was used to colonize, murder, and kill Black people. So let's just like start with that. And I mean, we can talk about my personal experiences, but they're just blips on on the situations that are systemic. Because essentially what we're talking about right now is the fact that Black people are not allowed to go to music school, essentially. Like if you are, like, these are segregated spaces, whether it's official policies or not. It's a policy if it's completely practiced, and it has been for years. I mean, at my school, which still calls it jazz studies, and not Black American music, there is not one Black professor in jazz. So what are we even doing here today? like what are we even talking about? But I mean, and I'm currently doing a lot of work within the School of Music, and it's been weird to sort of try to go back and be involved again, because it is just very re-traumatizing and frustrating. And even my own voice teacher, who's been my professor since I was 17, has recently decided that they don't want to teach me because now of my political action. Like they want to separate themselves from me, because I'm just so radical, I guess, like in which just asking for basic human rights is suddenly a radical move. But yeah, the majority of the people, all the Black and brown people that did go to the school that I went to when I was there, and I graduated in 2013, I mean, most of them have not sung publicly again. I've had stories of people never picking up their instrument again because it was so traumatizing. I've been publicly physically assaulted while in operas. I've been sexualized privately in lessons. Like these are everyday situations. So I think when we're talking about what are some of these issues, we have to understand that this is completely violent. That it's not just, oh, it's just music, it's not that serious. These are violent situations that are affecting people's lives. And that is the history of this work in the first place. Like, let's talk about why jazz is even in the university. Like, how did a genre that is built off the backs of Black people end up in a university setting where now Black people are not allowed to go and attend and engage in their own music? Like, so yeah, I don't know. So it's really exciting to meet people here and see people from across the country that are also interested in doing this work. But it is everyday battle. And again, it is a little frustrating to know where to go at certain points, because it's just me and like a team of maybe 6 other people. And and the dean of our college, I'm like, it's just a white supremacist, point blank. Like, so where do you go from there? How do you, so I guess that's just me chit chatting for a minute.
No, thank you so much for sharing. I was wondering if you still thank you so much for sharing that. If you're comfortable with sharing a bit more, I was wondering, has there been an ensemble or a playing situation where you did feel safe and where you hadn't experienced that violence?
No, I have never been in a professional setting or in a collegiate setting where I was like, yeah, this is right. I've been in, again, how do you feel safe when you're in operas where they're actively doing blackface? Like, how can I be in, no, which is why I'm very interested by the time I leave my my doctoral program to be able to direct and produce myself, because there is no finding places where I'm going to fit in, except for the ones that I build myself. So,
Yeah.
so I'm not very interested, and that's also part of the frustrating part. I really like your question about goals within music, because I don't think students are even asked what their goals are. It's assumed that you're a singer, so you must want to get to the Met. I don't give a fuck about the Met, because the Met doesn't give a like, because the Met doesn't give a fuck about me or my life. Like, they will actively see me dead. So why am I trying to prove myself and live by standards that are built to kill me? Like, I'm not interested in that. So when I'm trying to find people to educate me within these spaces, it's very difficult, because when you come in being like, I'm not interested in singing dead white composers anymore. That's not something I want to do. I want to sing Black composers in which they have been around making opera for the last 200 years. Like, that's what I'm interested in making. And immediately the question is, why? I don't know if I can do that. I'm not interested. So trying to even find the places to educate myself without being in violent situations is difficult just on that situation. Like, it's just difficult on that end. So I'm really struggling to even find places to do this work.
Allison, can I ask you? This is Robert Hurst. I want to ask you. I think the whole proposition of opera is such a European thing. It's such a European thing. And how can we? Why are we trying to fit ourselves into that shit? You know, I mean, what is our story? You are empowering me right now with your story to say that. Why are we trying to fit into fucking opera? Fuck opera. Fuck opera. I mean, I just think there's this other sensibility that we have that is us, you know, and where we are today as African Americans, you know. So I just had to say that. I don't know who I'm asking. I don't know if that's a question or whatever, but you know, I'm just putting that out there.
Hey,
No,
Allison. Sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say that I absolutely agree. If y'all haven't read Black Opera by Dr. Andre, I would definitely read it. And I really love it. She a lot of her thesis on Black opera, and she goes to South Africa and looks at how opera was used post-apartheid, and how it was used as a place for radical change, and how it was used as a place where, okay, let's make some new operas. Let's make operas about our history. Let's make operas about with languages from our people. Let's have Xhosa-based operas. And that's what I think is still useful about opera, because I love opera. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be doing this work, and I wouldn't be fighting if I didn't love this music. And that's one of the other frustrating things, is people just assume, well, if you must hate this. And I'm like, if I hated this, I wouldn't be here. So, you know, like, I've been training in this since I was in 7th grade. So of course I still care about this. I just want to see it as a transformational place for radical Black life. Because otherwise I can't participate. What were you gonna say? I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Actually, Jaden, you wanna come in?
Yeah. I just want to say I'm Jaden Atkins. I'm a junior at Delaware State University. It is an HBCU in the heart of Dover, Delaware. I'm just thankful that I'm here, a part of this conference. A lot of definitely inspiring information. I also want to say that I'm part of a group that plays the different music of James Reese Europe and the 369 Experience, Harlem Hellfighters. Yeah, it's a group. Basically, the group is called the 369 Experience. We're based of a whole bunch of musicians from different HBCUs around the country, and we go and we travel and we play the different music of the time, and it's a great experience. We're full of Black men and Hispanic men, just basically what the group looked like back in World War I. And I haven't personally experienced the racism of what Allison has gone through and has experienced, but I know that it's out there. And I know that if I'm continuing to pursue the career that I'm trying to become as a African American tuba player that's playing for some orchestra or whoever I get the opportunity to go through or play it with, I know it's gonna come my way. And I'm just thankful that everyone here we're just even here having this conversation about race, about sex, about whatever, any sort of way that someone can be discriminated, gender. And I definitely appreciate this. And I feel like this can really evolve into something greater. And I was in the earlier session and they were talking about partnering with HBCUs. I think that's a great idea because it's an easy way to uplift and get another group of just another demographic of people that are not at different that are at different universities and colleges and things. So I know I have a few friends that I sent messages to and different things. So I just thankful for everything and for what everyone has said so far, and I hope to continue.
And you know what's really, particularly very interesting about Colonel James Reese Europe is that like his music at the time was basically what they considered jazz. It's basically like, I mean, if you look at the history of Black music people were just making music. They were doing whatever they were doing. And white critics would give it some word that referred to something disgusting or noisy.
Yeah,
Related
you're
back.
right.
And it's like, there's a very fine line between James Reese Europe playing ragtime and jazz, when that fine line is only a couple years, and just the aesthetics changing when he was out in Europe and then he came back and he's like, whoa, everyone's doing something different.
Yeah.
That's really interesting is that Allison, what you're saying about opera, because it's like on one hand, right, we can have this conversation about like, oh, like that's a European, form of storytelling. Why are we perpetuating this? But in reality, like the idea of like Black opera is that it's always like, would you say that it's like, much like jazz, it's using the tools of the colonizers in this like post-colonized world as a commentary on their direct experience?
Sorry, what? It's
Oh.
sorry, like
No, I was just saying that it's like, I
like
think
using the master's tools here.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could see it in that lens. I think I'm interested in making it a more radical place because it's also what I have. Like it's what I have. This is the tools I've been given, for better or worse. And I it is difficult, I think. And even I was supposed to write an abstract for a situation, for like a conference, and I just ended up not writing it and not doing it because I was just like, I keep every sentence I start with is like opera is colonization. And I'm like, you can't start out that heavy. Like you just can't, like, you're not gonna get picked up in anywhere. Like, and but I think also, and this is I'm doing some archival work and trying to like get my hands on some of these Black operas as well. And I think when you're engaging with Black opera is also to know like the American tradition of opera would not exist without Black people. So how much is it the like colonizers' work? You know what I'm saying? Like there is no American tradition of opera without us. So I think, and there is, when you start listening and actually looking into it, a lot of these are jazz operas, a lot of these are blues operas. So I think just in the nature of the work, you see where it comes from. Like there is no George Gershwin without this kind of work. I mean, how many people, someone else brought up Amiri Baraka, but Baraka has written 2 or 3 operas himself. I would love to get my hands on those, and that's proving difficult, but so I think opera is going to be here for a long time. It's like an art form that's been dying for 300 years and yet is not dead. So and so it's like, what do you want to do with it? And I think, again, when we're thinking about the goals of education, this is one of these like neoliberal ideas that, oh, there is no goal in education, but you have to decide as an educator what you want this to look like. What do you want your university to do? What do you want to produce? Do you just want to produce proficient players, or do you want to produce artists that are going to be able to advocate for themselves and others? And I think we pretend that there isn't an intent, but there absolutely is. And what do you want to leave as a student? Do you want to leave being able to know how to create your own spaces and to tell your own story through music? Because that's something we pretend that we want to do, but then we don't actually do. When people ask you like, well, why are you in music? Oh, I just want to express myself. Like that's like your, classic 18-year-old freshman response. And then we don't give them any capabilities to do so.
I mean, that's an extension of us. I feel like that's an extension of us being raised in this Eurocentric framework where the whole notion of whiteness is not a race. There's no country called white land. It's basically de-raced, de-socialized music for the benefit of those who are white. So when you end up getting to music school, the idea of like telling your own story or talking about your own history, which is like when you listen to music from literally anywhere else in the world, it's all about your history. It's all about your identity. It's all about your preservation. But that's not really something that we're maybe told that we can do. Let's see. Oh man, lots of hands. Professor Hurst, did you want to say something?
I did. Yes. I just think the notion of calling it whatever that expression is, opera, is seeing it through the lens of a certain culture, and I think you have the ability to we have the ability to tell these stories and not call it opera. Why is it called opera? Why are we acquiescing to this culture that I say fuck that. It's not opera. Fuck opera. One thing, and then another thing I would say, ballet. Ballet. I've watched the Senegalese ballet, the ballet from Ghana, and what it just breaks my heart that they see the lens through this European situation, and I'm sorry, those I don't know what to even call them, but to see the lens of like this beautiful music and this beautiful dance through the lens of not Black people. This is really sad to me, and I think that's the culture. That's the culture. When we talk about what I want to accomplish in education, that is it. That is it. To see it to not see it in this European lens, and to see it really pure, the way that music is really presented. And I wish I could be more articulate right now, but I love it. Whatever everyone's position, because it opens everything up for me. But is okay. Please continue. That's all I had.
That's a good point. I mean, the thing is that it's like I feel like you could also say the same thing about like what is like heartbreaking about jazz. Like I don't see any Egyptian instruments represented in jazz, for example, and that's sad to me. I also like in my own home country in Egypt, people very often play within a Western modality, and that is sad. At the same time,
I disagree with that.
It's sad that
I think that's a false equivalent, but
in what way?
In that people have played shells and bagpipes and jazz, and if you could play and articulate your statement in jazz, that has nothing to do with racism or
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, so like that's the thing though, is that it's like another thing that is like it's part of like the heartbreaking kind of like tragic context of music post-colonialism is that it's like, you know, another thing is that like musicians in Egypt and musicians in say Venezuela use completely different forms and have completely different purposes for music. But post-colonialism, and this is by no means saying like, oh man, thank God we have colonists. Otherwise, we wouldn't have jazz. That's not what I'm saying. But it's like because like we had to synthesize a new language through the culture being stripped away. All of a sudden, we can have ensembles where you have bagpipes
Yeah,
and
we don't have to
and
bow down to the major scale, man. The major scale, fuck the major scale, man. Shit. There's so much shit that ain't the major scale. Why? Why are we fucking with the major scale, man? Fuck the major scale. Shit. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Also, like, I just wanted to check in with time. Allison, I saw you something about 4:30. Is this supposed to be over at 4:30 or?
No, I just wanted to give you like we have till 5. I know that 2 hours was a long time, so I just wanted to like see how the thing was going, to see if, you know, people were exhausted or but we can stay as long as you guys want. Like I think this is going I'm so happy to be listening to everything that's going on right now. So it's totally up to you. But we definitely have till 5 if everyone wants to stay.
Cool. Yeah, that's good then. I wanted to bring it back to I know that there's everyone's been raising your hands. Thank you so much for being engaged and having things to say. I'm like very green to this whole facilitating a conversation with 50 people. If you raised your hand, I'll definitely call on you. I remember seeing whose hand was raised. Um, I want to like make sure that uh, also that we also have like conversations between, you know, 1 or 2 people at the same time. We can have that back and forth and stuff. I wanted to go back to Allison Lewis. I realized I have to say your last name because we have like 500 Allisons in this group. So Allison Lewis. I was wondering, have you performed or have you ever been a part of any sort of like improvisations or like yeah, let's just start there. Have you been a part of like improvisation ensembles before?
No. No, not really. I was I wasn't part of the jazz ensemble in my undergrad. And I think that's also an issue of like respectability almost in what I was experiencing as an undergrad in some ways. I think I was very colonized back in those days, and I wanted to be seen as an opera singer because I think when you walk into a room and you are Black, there is an assumption of genre that's placed upon your body, and I wanted to be very separate from that, which is, I think, part of the violence of genre itself is that there is a hierarchy within genre, and wanting to play those politics and be like, no, I'm not a jazz singer. I don't sing pop. I'm an opera singer. Like you're playing these with these concepts, and do I wish I had now? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But back in the day, I was very dedicated to the idea that I'm not a Black artist. I'm just want to be seen as a good singer.
Right, because there's that gravity for everyone to assume that you're going to be. Do you feel like also sorry, 1 second. Sorry, I had to just like throw my phone across the room because it just keeps vibrating and I forgot how to shut it off. Sorry about that. But yeah, that is I can see it's definitely like part of that gravity. Like when you walk into a room, people expect a certain sound to come out of your mouth because of and because of their own stereotyping and their own racism and their own ignorance.
Is disparaging to that music itself. To assume that I, who grew up in predominantly white spaces, never went to Black church, but just because I'm Black, I'm going to suddenly have Big Mama Thornton come out of my mouth.
Right. Right. Yeah.
As if it's like a natural thing when it's not. Like those things are highly trained, practiced skills, and you don't just
Yeah.
have them just by birth and naturally. So to put that assumption on Black people immediately is to say that it doesn't take any work to get those sounds, which it absolutely does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering,
Can I say something?
yeah,
If I
sure.
can write really quickly.
Yeah.
I think if any person from America had to get to any university in India and had to articulate those skills, you know, and they were required to articulate that sensibility and those skills, they couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that the way that we place hierarchy in music is really not appropriate. You know, it's very one-sided. And wow, please forgive me for not saying the shit that I wanted to actually say, but you know, it's very true. You know, I mean, if however how we're measured is very biased.
Yeah. You know, I was on that note, you know, this is interesting. I was wondering, this kind of combines both professors, what you were saying, and Allison, what you were saying. Allison, have you heard of this composer, improviser named Amina Claudine Myers? Man, you should check her out. So what's interesting is that it's like, so in Black music, we have this history of Black musicians wanting to study classical music and wanting to study the Eurocentric tradition because they have love for the Eurocentric tradition and the aesthetics that are produced in that tradition, but are barred to entry by racist people. Like Charlie Parker wanted to compose for orchestras. He used to study scores and do all that stuff. They didn't let him. Nina Simone wanted to study piano, classical piano. They didn't let her. And that's just kind of like that's like such a common theme that, you know, it really brings into question, like when we talk about Black classical music, like what does that mean? You know, like because obviously it's a diaspora, right? There are people who compose within the European tradition, within the European band tradition, within the opera tradition, within the orchestral tradition. There's contemporary, there's people back in the day, there's like Moorish composition and stuff like that. You know, like, you know, ancient Black people, you know, in Europe, in Spain, stuff like that. And then when we get to like American history, it's like sometimes it feels like Black composers and, you know, are like trying to write that work, but part of like the legacy of that music is that they're like writing with that in mind within their own aesthetic. Like, and the reason why I brought up Amina Claudine Myers is because of do you know the AACM? So in the AACM, like a lot of the thing was that they just wanted to create. And that's still their thing, is that they want to create. And they would want to write orchestral pieces, they would want to write noise pieces, they would also want to play blues, they want to improvise, and they would want to write operas. But like no one would give them any credit. They wouldn't believe that there was intention behind it, which is like such a, you know, Eurocentric idea, like whether or not this piece has intention or whatever. And some, you know, for those people within the ASM, they would just write stuff based on what they would want to hear. So like, you know, let's say you want to write a piece like Milton Babbitt. You wanted to write, you know, like one of his like, you know, synthesizer sounding pieces that kind of go all over the place and whatever. Why couldn't you just sing that? Why couldn't you just play that on trombone? If you want to play an opera, but you only have 3 drums, Why can't you have everyone in the ensemble also sing? Like stuff like that. And it's interesting because it's like, on one hand, there's like Black composers who compose within the Eurocentric tradition, who are also like remake, like making their own narratives, like Anthony Davis and like George Lewis. And at the same time, like we also have, you know, I mean, George Lewis is a part of the AACM. You know, that's where like he cut his teeth. I remember like I was talking to him and he was like, yeah, the first time I told Muhal like what my compositional idea was. Muhal was one of the co-founders of the AACM. Muhal just kind of like looked at me and was just like, oh, that's your concept? It's pretty simple. Or like, oh, it's like pretty boring. And a lot of those composers, those contemporary composers, like cut their teeth there in terms of like being creative. And it kind of brings into question, like when we talk about Black opera and Black classical music, like what exactly is that? And I was wondering if you could elaborate also, because you said you're interested in radical opera, and I don't know too much about opera. I was wondering if you could talk about what is that when you talk about radical opera?
Yeah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, is like, what even is opera, and like what you know, and what are these genres, and who gets to define what they are, and who gets to define what they flow into and what they don't flow into. And I will say that I think even putting the word opera on your piece is a political move in and of itself. Like Kanye West came out with his operas, and the only thing the New York Times had to say about it was, "Is this an opera?" They didn't sit down, they didn't actually talk about the work, they didn't sit down and actually talk about it. They just said the name of the name of the critique was Kanye West is operatic, his opera is not. And again, it's like, who are we defining, and how are we defining opera in the first place? Like, opera is not like a and I'm going back to like my former analysis class back in the day. It's not one of these things where it has to have this kind of movement and then this kind of movement and then boom, it's an opera. If it's mostly sung, it's an opera. It can be 15 minutes long, it can be 4 hours long, it can be 3 days long. It can say whatever you want it to say. But the moment you put the word opera on it, suddenly then it's going to come in with these preconceived concepts of like, what is this? And how do I define this? When really the only person that should be defining it is the person that wrote it. So when I think of and sort of to what you were saying about these musicians who made such groundbreaking work, so often did so because they were so rejected from these certain spaces. I'm like, that's how Black music exists. You know, like I really feel like what we're not allowed, I mean, and it's kind of goes back to the exact same thing I was saying earlier, like, okay, well, I don't care about being in the Met anymore, so I'm gonna go make my own thing. That's what that idea is I'm not allowed in these spaces, so I'm gonna go make blues, I'm gonna go make this kind of music, I'm gonna go make something different that works for me. And suddenly what happens? Wow, white people hear it and they're like, oh my God, that's so cool, I'm going to engage in it. And they're allowed to engage in it
They go, they
over
move
and
on the
over
other
again.
side, yeah.
Exactly, which makes us be like, okay, well, I guess we have to make something else because they took that. So let's make hip hop. Let's make something else, which means that Black culture is always going to be a mineable, fertile place for theft. So
one of the things that's interesting about that too is that this whole idea of genres are imposed on the timeline of Black music in the first place. You know, like the whole reason that like, you know, there's like that anecdote that people love to tell where it's like, oh yeah, bebop is because of how it sounds. It goes bebop. And then it's like, you hear Dizzy talk about it. And he's like, yeah, it's also the sound of police clubbing Black people over the head. Like, you know, it's not really like those terms are it's not really like those like terms are like, because people are intent on setting up new genres. There's this lineage of just creativity, you know, like for example, where would you say, like, you can't really say where, for example, Mary Lou Williams, you know, ends and like John Coltrane begins. You can't, like, it's all part of the same thing. One of the hold on, I'm trying to remember. JGW, you have something to say?
I want to say that
Sorry, Professor Hurst. Sorry, I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to practice, just because should I call you JGW or what should I call you?
Yeah, please.
My name is Julia. I like to use an acronym sometimes because I was in a Zoom call at the beginning of quarantine that it was really bad. They like bombed it with terrible images that I don't even want to repeat. But anyways, I'm actually in the Netherlands, but I'm from Montreal, and I can't speak to an American experience. In Canada, we do talk a lot about the recognition and rights of Indigenous people. So it's in that mentality that I came to this idea. And it's also in combination with my studies of the AACM and Amiri Baraka's writings. And I always thought, and I've never proposed this before because I don't think it's my place, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Black art music instead of Black American music, because that's inclusive of Caribbean Black experiences. That's the Black Indigenous experience. That's class. Like, that's not putting anything in any kind of borders other than the fact that it comes from Blackness and it comes from art. So I'm just curious to hear what you guys have to think about that.
Wait, sorry, did someone else have their hand raised? I don't want, if someone had some response, I didn't want to speak first. Professor Hurst.
Can you guys hear me? My phone is ringing at the same time.
Yes.
I hope. So if y'all can hear me, one thing I want to say is, if you look at the music all over America, all over the world, everything is there's no place in the world that the rhythm section doesn't exist. The rhythm section is an African American construct. The whole thing of a drum, bass, rhythm, harmonic instrument existing, that doesn't exist without this construct. The whole construct of a drum set, a snare drum, bass drum, hi-hat, cymbals, some kind of, all of that being played by one person, that's an African American construct. And I would be really remiss if I didn't just say that in the world, and how that has influenced the world. So that is the biggest influence in the world, and the fact that people, how that has affected the whole world structure of music. Boom bap, 2/4, motherfuckers. Come on, y'all. That has changed the whole world. And y'all, people want to act like that. We gotta act like 12-tone music is the shit. Like how this genre of opera is the shit. This genre of this is the shit. We changed this whole situation.
Yeah.
And I I'm sorry to be so ignorant in my presentation of how to do it, but sometimes you just gotta say it plain.
Yeah,
you gotta say it plain, man. We put the shit fucking bass lines on shit. 2-bar bass lines have ruled the world. Fuck all of that 12-tone shit. That is the truth. And I'm apologies to my colleagues and being so ignorant, but I hear what you're saying, Allison Lewis. I hear what you're saying. But for us to measure our stuff through the lens of opera, through the lens, I think that's insulting to our ancestors. We have elevated everything that, we have elevated the whole lens of music, and I refuse to take a back seat to what European people say was the greatness, the illusion of beauty, the whole illusion of beauty. You know,
I feel like I'm a little confused about the critique. Just are you just saying that like to use opera itself is to be colonized, or
speaking of,
because I'm like, in that sense we could also just start ripping out, certain instruments from Black people's hands as well. Like, why are we even utilizing certain instruments then if this isn't purely African? So I'm just sort of like, at what point do you start being like, you shouldn't be engaging in this?
I'm not saying that opera isn't relevant. I'm saying that to just uh, 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 relegate our artistic lens through opera and this is a bad construct. It limits our whole.
I agree. Yeah, I agree that too. That to study opera in today's music education is to be told that you cannot be Black within this space.
I'm not saying to not do that, because that is excellence. That is, I'm not. Wagner is beautiful. I'm not saying that that's not beautiful. I am also saying that just to only measure your artistic expression through that genre is very European, and it only represents one part of the world. If that's how you choose to do it yourself, then I welcome that. I don't want to tell you that you're doing anything wrong. I certainly don't want to do that. But to me, to say that that is the penultimate way of expression for vocal, excellence.
And I would never say that. I would never say that. I would say that it is a way of vocal expression that is just as valuable as jazz performance and blues performance. And the issue is, I
wouldn't say that, but I appreciate that you would say that.
Yeah. I think the issue is absolutely is that there's a hierarchy that we see opera singers as, oh, like you walk in, you say you're an opera singer, people are like, but if you say that you do pop or jazz, people are like, that's cool. Like you can see the hierarchy in everyday life. So yeah, I agree that too. If you're only measuring yourself through the lens of what you are going to get at a university of what opera is to self-mutilate, like is to call self-harm.
Yeah, I feel like for Julia, this is actually the perfect example of why it should be called Black American music. Part of the discrepancies within the AACM is that some people think that certain music is too Black, or not too white, excuse me. Some people think certain music is too white, right? Vocalist Betty Carter was very critical of Ornette Coleman, for example, because of the way he sounded and because of the distance that she felt Ornette Coleman had, left between the language of the blues and the language of swing, the language of jazz, and the language that he was creating. And you had that split within like the AACM as well. There were cats who were like, trying to embrace what they believed was more of the African aesthetic and going back to your history and your lineage that was stripped away from you. In the Pan-African People's Orchestra, that's the primary philosophy, for example. It's very much about reconnecting with this idea of storytelling, where you come from, connecting back to your motherland that you were stolen from. And then for other composers, it's they're working with like a much larger palette, and or not a much larger palette, excuse me. They're working with different material, and they're exploring different sounds. Like Anthony Braxton or George Lewis or Amina Claudia Myers, or even Nicole Mitchell or Lee Harris for like some contemporary people. And the reality of it is that this music is very much a result of the violence that our country had to undergo in order for this country to be America in the first place. I mean, for me, I'm an Egyptian person. So, I come from Africa, North Africa. And I look like an Egyptian and, I'm treated as such when I come here. The whole reason that I fit within the idea of Black American music, I don't feel like I need it to be Black art music, because the reason that I'm treated the way I am is because I am in America. It's not necessarily that like I need a preserved vein of my Egyptianness in order to be integrated within Black art music. And at the same time, being that everyone comes from different parts of the diaspora, some people from Jamaica, some people from their lineage of being in the States, some people from wherever, and then we all get together and perform something like an opera, but don't call it an opera, or some people do call it an opera, an opera with also a bebop, like someone or an improviser who particularly prefers bebop language, and also someone who's using a Eurorack synthesizer, and someone who invented instruments out of trash cans, someone who's playing like a really expensive violin, like whatever. That really constitutes, in my opinion, why we would call it Black American music in the first place. Because that type of music can't really be built in the context of, say, Egypt. Egypt has a different colonial legacy. And also the influence of American music and American aesthetics on Egypt is very much in that direction. For a lot of Egyptian, pop or contemporary music, for example, that's all influenced by what was considered pop and contemporary music in America first, even though there are Black people in both countries. And I just I see we're getting towards the end of time. I wanted to kind of wrap up what my main point was for the questions. Thank you all so much for participating. First of all,
well, can I say one thing, man? What you just said was so beautiful, and I just want to highlight what you.
Yeah, sure.
What you just said is, we try to be colorblind, and we try to be equal, and we try to be have equality and equity in what we do, but it's highlighting what we are, highlighting what you do as an Egyptian person, and highlighting what I do as an African American guy from Detroit. We have to address these differences in order to achieve equity and equality. And it's a deep thing, man. How it's like a circular thing, like how I want to be I want to be accepted by whoever and all of these things, but I also want you to accept me as me, and I don't know. I think what you said, is so beautiful. If the white man didn't just be like fucked up and say his shit was the shit, and that is like a thing, and I'm never gonna let that go. And I'm just like, wow, why do we have to say Black Lives Matter continuously? Why do we have to say, Egyptian lives matter?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I went on a tangent. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I feel you though. That's a perfect segue for me to get into like the whole thing that the reason why I sent these questions in the first place. By the way, can all of y'all see the question? Just raise your hand if you can see the questions from earlier in the chat.
I can't see them right now.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so maybe we'll Allison, could you share your screen again one more time? So we're gonna we gotta
Oh, yeah,
I want to see if we can maybe like send these questions like in an email or something, because I think these are useful questions to just have on hand. The whole reason that I brought up these questions in the first place is that when we are making music within the Black music continuum, which everyone is doing that. No matter what you're doing, everyone is doing that. We have to find a way to make sure that everyone is a part of the conversation, because that's the point of this music in the first place, right? Like for Black musicians, we don't get to play our music in just we don't get to play it, right? And for for enslaved Africans who are brought here, their music was stripped away from them, and so they had to synthesize music. They had to create a music in which everyone could express themselves. So now that we're going forward and we're creating this music, it's very important for us to always be aware of how are we developing our musical language so that everyone is incorporated. How can we create a language that me, as an Egyptian musician living in America with my language, um, can communicate with somebody from, you know, the Dominican Republic, or somebody from Mexico, or someone from Detroit, or wherever, in a way that we all feel seen. And also creating a language in which people who are not visible in our community, our communities, can actually feel comfortable and feel like they have a space. Like for Allison, you were saying that you never performed in a space where you didn't feel that violence earlier. When we create our own languages and when we create our own ensembles, we can create a future where in our ensembles you don't feel that violence. And a lot of it also comes, it's not just that the burden falls on, like white men specifically. It also falls on, us like Black men, and also like white women as well, for making sure that we eradicate this racism and misogyny, even though we are also victims of the white supremacist patriarchy. That to me necessitates creating a new language all the time. Stuff that I didn't really, kind of get to. Thanks for, working with me on this. I've never like given like a talk or facilitated anything like this before, so thank you. But part of, what I wanted to get to is that it's like sometimes when we write music, there is inherently no space for certain voices, right? Like if you write music and it's all written down and you want to work with people in your community, and some people don't know how to read music, they're not going to be able to participate. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't write music? No, absolutely not. If you want to write music, write music. There's something that's valuable when you can do that. But maybe there's also a way to write music where you forego some of your authorship as a composer that has been afforded to you by the violence of Eurocentric thought, in order to allow people who have a more organic music making approach and a more intuitive music making approach to have their own presence. For example, in Anthony Braxton's Ghost Trance music, it's heavily notated, heavily notated. However, you are allowed to do whatever you want. You are allowed to improvise. And the same thing goes for a lot of sects of radical Black music. We're all playing music in this tradition, right? Maybe people will traditionally expect this more masculine sound and will be very misogynist and will dis and will act violently towards people who don't have that sound and will act to silence them. Well, if we strive towards a new language and are constantly creating a new space for us to make this music, then we can envision a version of playing this music that doesn't have to be through this lens of patriarchy where masculinity is the only way to perform, and that the only space for women to add their voices is as a vocalist or as like eye candy, as often as how a lot of jazz bands will often operate. So I guess like the thing that I would leave y'all with, because it seems like we're at the end of our time, and again, Allison, if you could, send these questions to everyone, that would be really great. Is how do you honor the legacy of Black music through your community? How are you, number one, connecting with the lineage of all the Black elders who came before you, learning that material, then seeing who's around you, who lives in the apartment next to you, who lives in the apartment below you, who lives down the street, who works at this record store, who works at wherever, and seeing how do I take those lessons and create a new language where everyone can participate. Thank you. Y'all can message me on Facebook if we're Facebook friends, or email me if you have questions. I'm trying to get better at responding. I'm so bad at responding to things. I really want to continue this conversation. Yeah, thanks again, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zekkereya. This was fantastic. And thank you everyone for being here and for lending us your brains and your voices for these couple of hours. It's been awesome. I'll send out these questions in an email. And yeah, if anyone wants to say anything, now's the space. I'll end the call in a couple minutes. Thank you again, Zekkereya.
Oh, no problem. I'm gonna just quickly type in my email, and if y'all wanna hit me up, you're more than welcome to. I'm also gonna type in my Facebook name because I just respond to messages a little bit better. I'm still bad at it, but I swear to you, I'm trying to get good. Okay, my Facebook name. Oh, ooh, there's no 3 in there. There we go.
Great. Thank you all. And just so you know, our keynote speaker is tonight at 7, Terilyn Carrington.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for
Thank
showing
you guys
up.
so much.
That was so hard. Thank you guys for helping me with that.
That was awesome. All right. Thank you all. I'll leave it on for a couple seconds if anyone wants to add their emails in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah.
I have cool Canadian Egyptian music to send you.
Yeah, please, please.
Yeah.
Also, what's
like
your
improvised?
I feel like
here, I'll put my full name. I don't know. Yeah, I'm from Montreal. My name is Julia Warren.
Like Ethan Cohn.
I also go by.
And those like McGill people.
No, but I didn't go to McGill, but I know McGill people. But yeah, I'm a human, out here in the jazz world. It's a small jazz world, so I'm sure we're just a degree away from each other. And I've actually been in touch with Ed for my master's stuff. So I'm in Holland right now. It's 11 o'clock.
Having a grand old time.
It's ginger tea. It's lit.
It's lit. Nice. Please send us. You said, Julia, you don't have a Facebook?
I do not have Facebook. I ditched the social medias, but I love writing emails. So whenever you feel like, take your time, and I'm very happy to be in the loop with you guys for anything you're doing, because we're making big moves. Like I feel like we've got to really use collective strength on this one across the whole world. So
yeah.
Happy to have some American energy.
Yeah, and it's like, for these these symposiums are really good because they amplify like a conversation that we would normally have. Another thing is that we also have to have these conversations and maintain them daily. From my experience in the university, it was kind of, I talk about these things. I've already said them, and I'm usually kind of disregarded. and I point things out, and I'm usually shut down. So,
That's why I want to start a school with all of you kind of people.
Yeah, I mean that's what Muho did.
No, fuck the whole school thing, man. Like, there's no way. It's too much work. We can't change all of these systems. We have to make new ones completely from the ground up. But that takes a fucking time and energy and research and collaboration and
Yeah. Yo, let's keep in touch. I'm down. I'm down with this conversation.
So
I know that we probably got to get off of this.
Yeah.
But let's how do you have my email now?
Yeah, I copied it, and so I'll send you a message just to say hi.
Hell yeah, yeah, please do, please do. I'm down. I'm like working on some writing myself. I was kind of like trying to do something over the summer, but it's kind of hard, and institutions be institutioning, and just at a certain point, we gotta just like stop and be like, okay, nothing's gonna happen. So I have some writing, and I'll send it to you and stuff like that, and it'll be cool.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Many things I could say, but all gratitude. Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Thank you again, Zekkereya. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. I hope it was okay. I hope people liked it. And I had this game plan coming into it, and then
it was fantastic.
I say something, and I'm like, yeah, sure, say something.
I think it was extremely profound, worthwhile, and you did an awesome job. Thank you for doing it. I'm so glad that you led this discussion.
Thank you.
Awesome. We'll be in touch soon.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.